Well, welcome back. Now, this election that comes up in less than a week, there are 3 states that have a marijuana ballot initiative on them. Colorado, Oregon, and Washington State all have initiatives. Now, these initiatives go a little bit farther than what you've seen. There are 16 states in the past that have enacted medical marijuana initiatives, but these 3 initiatives go beyond medical marijuana. They go all the way to just allowing it, legalizing it, decriminalizing it, rather, as for recreational use. This is something that affects everybody, whether or not you need marijuana for medical uses or whether or not you use it recreationally. There are a lot of things going on here that affect people, even if you're not a pot user. You know, there's an issue of prohibition. And if you remember back to alcohol prohibition, prohibition corrupts the government. Prohibition creates violence, and that's what we're seeing in all aspects of the drug war. The other thing is that we have a tremendous jail population. Here in the United States, we only have 5% of the population of the world, and yet we have 25% of the world's prison population. And most of that is due to the war on drugs. As a matter of fact, violent criminals, people like murderers, are let out frequently because they don't have enough jail space to keep in nonviolent, to keep them in when they have mandatory minimums for nonviolent offenders using marijuana. The other way that it affects you is that even if you are not one of the people, or somebody in your family is not someone who goes to jail with these laws, you're going to be paying for it. You're going to be paying up to $50,000 a year to keep these people in jail. And finally, it's about how the government unconstitutionally denies you a right to use something that you believe that you need. How did they get the alcohol prohibition passed? Well, they did it with a constitutional amendment. They did that because at that time, our government still respected the Constitution. Today, everything is prohibited unless they expressly permit it. Well, tonight on the show, we've got New Jersey weed man, Ed Fortune. Now, Ed was in a documentary that you can pick up at our store, How the Weed Won the West. He's a longtime activist and actually a political candidate, and he's been a victim of this illegal war on drugs. And he's fought it, and he's won an important victory. And we're going to talk to Ed about that victory. It involves something that's very important to all of us, jury nullification. Well, Ed, welcome to the show. Kind of get us up to date as to what's been going on with your case. I know that you had a jury trial in May and then another one just a couple of weeks ago. Tell us a little bit about circumstances that led up to that.
Yeah, well, I got arrested basically 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, on April Fool's Day, 2010. While I was visiting New Jersey from California, and I got pulled over by a New Jersey state trooper who eventually searched my car. He got a search warrant. He did search my car with a valid search warrant, and in my luggage was a pound of my medicine, my marijuana. And I was charged with possession with intent to distribute. And from the very beginning, I said I was taking it all the way to a jury trial, and I was invoking a jury nullification defense, which raised a few eyebrows. And I took it all the way to trial. The first trial in May of 2012, I got a hung jury. The prosecution elected to retry me again. And we just had that trial in October 2012, and I got a 12-0 verdict of not guilty. The first trial was a 7-5, a hung jury, and then so I really felt really vindicated when I got the 12-0 not guilty. The first time I expected to get a hung jury. The second time I expected to get a hung jury. So the only surprise to me, the second trial was that I got a 12-0 verdict for not guilty.
That's great. We just had a case also there in California that we talked to someone. His name is Jason Andrews, and he has a marijuana clinic. And he was totally legit, had filled out all the paperwork, and yet it was not the feds, but it was the state, the local people who came after him. In his case, it was a hung jury also, just one juror, and he bragged about jury nullification, and they're going to come after him a second and possibly a third time about that. But the thing that I find that's really important in both your case and the case of Jason Andrews is that both of you are willing to push this jury nullification thing, and that's really important. So many people, when they get charges brought against them that aren't just, they'll plea bargain out, and they don't even bother to go to trial. And you guys are standing on principle, and you're putting your confidence and your faith in your fellow citizens who are going to stand up for justice in your case. And in your case, you won. I think that's a great thing. You've been an activist for FJA for quite a while, haven't you?
Yes, for at least 15 years. I think I first started openly talking about jury nullification in the 90s. I had a trial back in 2000 that I went well into the third day of trial, and then I succumbed to a really lenient plea offer also. I was facing 20 years that time, and right in the middle of my trial, you know, I had one juror started crying and saying she couldn't put me in prison, and another juror was shaking her head every time I talked, and the prosecution realized that I was going to get a hung jury that time and offered me a plea deal that I took, and I always regretted it. And I said if I was ever in that situation again, that I wouldn't take a plea ever again. You know, because it is I've known for a long time that, you know, I don't care where you go. If you get 12 people and you get to argue that the law is wrong and not you, that you're going to get someone on the jury who believes that. You know, we all know what the statistics are. At this point, it's over 50% of Americans believe that marijuana should be legal. So if you can get to argue before a jury of 12 people, chances are you're going to get at least 6 of them. You know, like I said, the first time I went to trial, I got 7-5. This last time, I got 12-0. You know. But I think this message about jury nullification and arguing to the jury that the law is wrong and not you, just say you didn't do anything wrong. Like, admit to everything and then say you didn't do anything wrong. And I believe that's the key to our success. That we can win. We can win this war.
That's right. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I just said FJA. For those people who don't know, that's a fully informed jury association, and you can go to FJA.org and get a lot of information about what they're doing. There's a great site. But, you know, that's something that has been, juries were designed from the beginning of our government, from people who founded this country. They realized that citizens needed to watch each other's back. And there's all kinds of quotes from Patrick Henry and other people. I mean, this is not anything new. It's something that's been taken away from us for some time. And a lot of Americans don't realize that we've always had this. This is a legal, traditional way to secure each other's liberties. A lot of people don't realize that because of the lying and the intimidation that's done by judges and the court system towards jurors and towards defendants. You know, they offer the carrot of plea bargaining to the defendants, and then they lie to the jurors and tell them that they have to judge the facts, that they can't think about the case, and then they intimidate lawyers who want to try to use as a defense. But now, in your case, did you act as your own lawyer, or did you find a lawyer that would speak up about that?
No, that's a hard thing, to find a lawyer who will argue jury nullification. So I had to represent myself. I was forced to represent myself because of that, because no lawyer is going to argue that.
That's right. That's right. Well, now, I don't know if you're aware of it, but New Hampshire has just passed a law earlier this year where a judge cannot punish a lawyer for telling the jury that they can judge the law as well as the facts of the case. So that's moving it towards that way. But the amazing thing is that in many, many states, it's written in the state constitution that the function of jurors is to judge not just the facts of the case, but to judge the law.
Yes, you know, I think that was the greatest tactic in my trial. The fact that all I did was I wrote New Jersey Constitution, Article 1, Paragraph 6 on a big poster board, and I put it right in front of the jurors, and I read it. And the first trial, the judge tried to stop me. We had an open argument in front of the jury, and then he allowed me to read it because I was like, why can't I read the Constitution to the jurors? But he allowed me to read it, but when I tried to repeat it 2 or 3 times, he wouldn't let me do it. This second trial, not only did I read it, I kept referring to it, and I left it sitting right there in front of him the entire 3 days of the trial. That poster sat right in front of him, and I'll tell you what New Jersey Constitution Article 1, Paragraph 6 says. It says, in all prosecutions or indictments, and that's what I was indicted and I was being prosecuted. So it says, in all indictments or prosecutions, the truth may be given as evidence to the jurors, and the jury may determine the law as well as the facts. And that's what the case I was putting on, that if a jury has a right to determine the law as well as the facts, then I'm arguing the law is wrong, not I. I didn't do anything, you know. And what I told the jury was I felt like I was the victim. And during the voir, the questioning of the juries before they were picked, several of them expressed their misgivings about the war on drugs. There were a couple questions that were asked specifically about marijuana. You know, the prosecutor would have used up all of his challenges in the first 15 people if you know, if he was allowed to. So what happened was he got overwhelmed. He didn't have enough challenges to get rid of all the people that had positive opinions or opinions similar to mine.
Yeah.
You know,
well, the tide is against him, isn't it? I mean, you know, there's 3 states that have ballot issues about marijuana legalization, and not just for medical marijuana this time. Oh,
yeah. I think it's Washington and Oregon and maybe Arkansas or somebody.
It's Portland. Portland is the 3rd one, yeah.
Right.
And, you know, they just had some statistics released on Monday of this week. The FBI, in their latest statistics, said that half of all drug arrests were for marijuana. And they had so many of them, somebody worked out, it was actually the intelhub.com worked out, that's 1 marijuana arrest every 47 seconds. And they had a guy from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition that's called LEAP. He said that it's costing, not even including the cost of the trial or cost of putting people in prison, but just the cost of arresting people and arraigning them and that sort of thing. He estimated it being between $1.5 to $3 billion a year. That's something that affects everybody, you know, whether they smoke marijuana, whether they need it for health issues, whether they're doing it recreationally, or whether they're not doing any of that. They're still paying for the government that, you know, is spending money that way. I mean, it's still coming up. They're going to pay for that in taxes. Exactly. But I'm sorry, you were saying that in this last case, you were able to put that up there. I think it's just amazing that judges would suppress the reading of the Constitution of the state, you know, as they did in your very first trial. I mean,
yeah, well, he attempted to. And see, that's another thing. Throughout my trial, the judge kept stopping me or trying to stop me from saying certain things. And I learned, I've watched other trials. You know what you do? You just blurt it out unexpectedly. And by the time the judge gets to, you know, trying to stop you, the jury already heard it.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And you know, no matter how many times he says disregard that, you know, we're human. We hear it.
Yeah,
it gets logged in. And you know, I constantly thank the jurors, you know, and I gave them a little history lesson too. You know, I basically told my jurors, you know, that the founding fathers of this country intended the jury to be like the 4th branch of the government, that all laws had to be approved of and passed by them before they can be enacted. And, you know, in my case, you know, we got to the point where the marijuana laws are outdated and, you know, based on false information. And at this point in history, people know the truth. And the law is a lie. The law is flawed. Yep. And, you know, and this is what I presented to them. You know, just the fact that New Jersey's criminal statute, which is what I was being prosecuted under, calls marijuana a Schedule I drug. Right. And we know that, you know, 16 other states have legalized marijuana for medicinal reasons, including the state of New Jersey, but I wasn't allowed to talk about it in my trial for some reason. That's a legal argument that I'm sure I'm going to win on appeal, by the way. But I wasn't allowed to talk about it, but I'm pretty sure most of the jurors knew. And then I have a bone cancer condition that the law that I was being prosecuted under didn't allow at all. There was no exemptions. There were no medical exemptions to our criminal statutes in New Jersey. So just the fact that I was able to talk about my personal medical problems and how I used marijuana despite the law, and I basically said I disregarded the law all the time. I pointed out how I had marijuana right there in the courtroom. I was eating brownies and cookies the whole time.
In the courtroom?
Yes, they didn't realize that it was brownies until the end.
Well, you know, one of the things that happened after this is after you were declared innocent by 12 jurors doing jury nullification, Now, after you went back to California, even though you're a fully bona fide medical marijuana patient under the California laws, you've now got the DEA coming after you, right? The feds in California. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, during my trial, during the trial proceedings in the beginning, 2 years ago, I was traveling back and forth from New Jersey to California, and I made no bones about it that I was going to fund my entire defense based, on, I was going to pay for it with my proceeds out of my dispensary. Mm-hmm. I had every intention of paying for witnesses. I had every intention to getting a couple expert witnesses. And the prosecutor in the case complained to the DEA in Los Angeles about me. And at some point, the DEA launched an investigation. That's what they call it in Los Angeles when they decide to target you for a for closure. They say they're launching an investigation because technically, through federal law, it's always illegal. Marijuana is always illegal. So what happened was, because of my case in New Jersey, the prosecutors complained to the big brother of Uncle Sam, the DEA, and the DEA came and raided me last December and basically put me out of business, left me penniless, took all my possessions. I real quick lost my apartment that I was living in, and my shop that I was working out of, my grow operations, everything. I lost everything in a matter of a month or two after that raid.
So where does it stand right now? Are they coming? They're coming after you right now, isn't that correct? Or
yeah. Well, what happened was, for several months I struggled trying to survive. I still was going back and forth to court, until I can get until my trial. And in between the trials, I was able to reopen the location. I mean, it took me like 10 months to do it, 8 months to do it. But I opened a new location a couple weeks just before I went back for the retrial. So while I was in my retrial, it was known that I had opened up a new place. Well, immediately upon winning the case, 2 hours later, while I was having beers and celebrating my victory with my supporters, I get a phone call from the DEA in Los Angeles. And basically they called me to tell me that, that they saw on a Google alert, they said that I had won my case. I suspect the prosecutor called them and told them, but yeah, they said a Google alert. But either way, they basically made arrangements for me to come on the 29th, which was just Monday, and pick up some of my belongings from that raid last year. And it was kind of ominous to me, like, okay, a year ago you raided me, you took all my stuff, on the day that I win in New Jersey, a month, 2 hours after I win, the DEA calls me and tells me to come pick up some of my stuff.
All right.
So it was kind of like a little bit scary. But then the very next day, after the trial, here in Los Angeles, a DEA agent named Patrick Kelly, who led the investigation, by the way, a year ago, he showed up at my new dispensary, the U.S. Collective, which is located directly across the street from a general hospital here in east of Los Angeles. But he showed up and basically ordered my employees to close by the end of the day, or they'd be included in the next investigation, which, like I said, they used that word investigation. Yeah,
just to threaten them.
Like a raid, right? So they threatened them. On the 22nd of October, which is 4 days after my acquittal, I get a letter from the Justice Department, from the DEA, ordering this location to close. They gave me 14 days to do it, told me to contact my lawyer. They made all their threats in the letter. I think I emailed you a copy of the letter. But yeah, I've got until like November the 5th to close, or they're going to launch another investigation, another raid.
Well, we certainly wish you luck with that. And if anybody wants to help you with this, tell them about your website. You're at NJweedman.com. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm at NJweedman.com. You can find me at Facebook the same way. But what I really need help. Maybe a lawyer to help me. But I need people to support. If I'm going to stay open, I need people to come. I mean, there's plenty of growers around, plenty of vendors who could help me weather the storm too. I mean, we can overgrow the government easily. You know, I don't want to end up like Roger Christie in Hawaii. I don't know if you ever heard of Roger Christie, but Roger Christie was I'd say we were similar activists. You know, he engaged in civil disobedience, and you know, he had a religious aim to his activism too, and you know, the government threw him in jail 2 years ago, basically around the same time I got arrested in New Jersey. He got arrested in Hawaii, but they didn't give him bail. So he's been there for 2.5 years, and he's holding out for a jury trial himself.
Well, we'll see if we can get some information about him. Maybe we can get him on the show. I really appreciate you talking to us. We're out of time, but what you're doing is something that helps everybody, whether marijuana is their issue or not. I mean, marijuana is something that affects everybody, whether or not it's their issue. Jury nullification is something we need to have. We've gotten into we've kind of been bamboozled by the legal system to think that we can count on the Supreme Court to protect our rights, but that's never been the design of this country, and it hasn't worked out very well for us in the last few years, has it, Ed?
No.
No, juries are the way to go. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. That's NJweedman.com if you want to help Ed. It sounds like he needs your help, NJweedman.com. Well, tonight we've had a lot of people talking about a lot of different issues, but the common thing is that whether it's elections or whether it's jury nullification or whether it's speaking out when you're unjustly singled out, as Wade Hicks was, we have to speak out. And there are ways besides elections that we can keep our freedoms. Well, be sure to pick up a subscription to prisonplanet.tv. Take a look at InfoWarsShop.com. Those are ways where you'll find out resources that are going to help you to get into the fight, help to inform your friends and neighbors to stick together. That's it for our show tonight. I'm David Knight.